End-to-end security. It means ensuring that right people are on your teams and managing the security surrounding it. It means managing access, business communication security, product security, and supply relationship security. How to achieve end-to-end security and how can zero trust help here? Hi there, I'm Suparna Goswami, Associate Editor with Information Security Media Group, and I have two experts to discuss further on this. I have with me today Abbas Kudrati, who is Director Cybersecurity Advisor, Microsoft, and Mohit Gupta, Group Chief Information Security Officer at Motherson Group. Hi, Abbas, and hi, Mohit. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, Suparna, thank you for having us today. Pleasure.
So, Abbas and Mohit, the first question I'd want to address to both of you. We are talking about end-to-end security today. So let me first start by asking the basics, so covering the basics. What does end-to-end security mean to you both? So Abbas, maybe you want to start and then Mohit can join in.
Yeah, absolutely. See, of course, if you ask end-to-end security to a different person, one from the tech company like me and one from the Mohit, you're going to get a different answer. And I'll tell you the reason why, right? When we talk end-to-end security, let's look at how the threat landscape or how we operate has changed, right? We are no longer on-premise. We are no longer behind the firewall. We are no longer managing the security for our own company. We are hyper-connected. When I say hyper-connected, you have the contractor connected to your network. You have third-party suppliers connected to your network. You have your multiple types of device, could be the handheld device, the BYOD mobile device, the laptops, the desktop. You have your sensors and IT and OT environment. You have your SaaS, PaaS, IaaS kind of cloud environment. So it's very, very connected. And when you say end-to-end security, it should cover the whole spectrum of technology. When I say whole spectrum, it covers everything, right? People, process, yes, network, all those things are part of that. But if you ask me as a technologist working for Microsoft, I would say my focus here is from hyper-connected, all the endpoints, all kind of signals which I'm capturing across multiple device, multiple endpoints, multiple cloud platform, hybrid environment, all those things is to be covered in the end-to-end security concept. Mohit, over to you.
Well said, Abbas. I guess that this certainly is interesting. I guess end-to-end security simply means security across all layers of your business. But I'm sure the way you responded is not that simple, and the way I responded is also not that simple. I guess that the answer cannot be given in a short time, but and may probably take multiple master classes to cover security across maybe OSI layers, across all business processes, or maybe across all transactions, across all communication channels. And you rightly touched a point that it is not limited to your network. It has gone beyond. So now we are operating in a perimeter-less sort of environment, which is not only that your endpoints are anywhere, which is where your employees, your IT users are, but your suppliers are connected, your customers are connected. And more than that, they are also hybrid and they are also anywhere sort of environment. So yes, end-to-end security has multiple meanings, but I'll take a few examples and probably that will highlight how this could be even more complex. Say, for example, I talk about endpoint, and you also rightly touched that you always talk about laptops, computers, tablets, mobile devices. But many smart people do cover an endpoint, even servers as well. But then what about IoT devices? What about those sensors which are there on the road? For instance, in our environment, there are about 20 odd sensors per fleet, which is there on the road, on the move. So with 800 into 20, you could imagine the sensors which are moving on the road, and you have to ensure that security of all those endpoints. Then OT machines. I mean, there are nearly about 50 odd device types, because if at all I go beyond endpoints, then device types also has variety of device types. You rightly touched handheld devices, your barcode scanners, your printers, and SCADA machines, PLCs machines, robot machines, the machines which are connected to them. So yes, the complexity is even more. And end-to-end security, I guess that it would be too less to cover so far as topic goes. When we talk about, say, another example, operating system, we generally talk about Windows, Linux, Mac, but in today's environment, we also have now Android and iOS. How many of us actually are talking about it? Then there are, in our environment, there are hundreds of proprietary OS for those OT machines which are there on the production floor or into those IoT devices. We could talk about data in transit, at rest, but how about in processing? But more than that, what is the encryption standard that we are following? So, I mean, it has multiple dimensions and obviously requires a holistic risk assessment approach to determine what exactly is end-to-end security for the business and covers all layers of your business.
Sure, Mohit. So as you and Abbas both mentioned, it has multiple dimensions. You touched upon IoT, OT. So let me first start with the cloud. Now, the journey to the cloud has been going on for some years now. So, of course, there are industries which are more mature in their journey towards the cloud, and while there are other industries which are still a little skeptical. With most industries, but I would assume that most industries are adopting hybrid cloud solutions. What have been some important lessons they have learned or not learned in the past 2 years, and what are things enterprises must pay attention to? Abbas?
You want to go with me first? Okay. The first part is what has changed, right? So, for example, if you look at 5 years back, not to go too much far, of course, cloud has been there for more than 5 years. But 5 years back, if I take example, people used to step away from cloud, saying that I want to stay away from cloud. I don't trust where my data is. I don't know what cloud service provider will have access to and whatnot. And I like, from a traditional approach, I want to see my servers. I want to hug them and feel it that, yes, they're in front of me, right? It's in my data center. I am the owner of that. But pandemic has really taught a lesson to everyone that being a lockdown situation, trying to manage everything on-premise when you don't have a single employee coming to your environment in your network. How are you going to manage all those data centers and connectivities and remote connections, especially? So people have started moving towards cloud all of a sudden. And as you see, must have heard Satya Nadella, our CEO, mention that 2 years of digital transformation we just saw within the 3 months of pandemic, because people had a plan to slowly migrate and adapt the cloud according to their own pace and requirement. But pandemic situation, they have to start moving everything or maximum stuff on the cloud so they can take advantage of the elasticity and the security responsibility with the cloud service provider, as well as they can manage things remotely rather than focusing and coming to the on-premise requirement, right? On the second part, you mentioned that, yeah, some organizations and even some countries are mature. I live in Australia, and when I came to Australia 7 years back, where I was working as a CISO, and I was pleasantly surprised that Australian government, or within the state which I was, Victoria, they had a cloud-first policy. So anything as a CISO, because I was working in a public sector company as a CISO, if I wanted to fire up a new VM or a new server, first policy is you have to go to the cloud. You cannot have anything in the data center. Because this country was that mature, and they had an understanding that, okay, data center is in Australia, for example, Microsoft data center is in Australia, and they are relying on that, and there is some agreement, they will keep the data here. So cloud first policy, including New Zealand, cloud first policy. That was an approach even for last 7 years. But some countries, if you look at it in Asia side, they are still big hesitant, and they are not moving towards that, because one reason could be they don't have a physical data center in their own country. And maybe the cost does not justify for the companies like Microsoft or AWS or Google to set up the data center in that country. But there is a neighboring country where they have a good relationship, and we call it a one-stop or one-hop access. So because of that reason, initially they were hesitant, but as the markets get mature, as we are working and discuss with the policy owners and the government and regulatory body, now slowly they are seeing the benefit of how they can reap the benefit of working with the cloud service provider, and the advantage of responsibility of sharing the responsibility for security as well. Because once you go on the cloud, security is the #1 priority on that side, right? So country to country, industry to industry difference maturity we have seen. I can give you a few more examples, but I'll park it for now and share with you. industry specific example of what we have seen. But I feel like Mohit, you want to add something on that.
Sure. But I have a little contrary view to how cloud first policy has come to this stage now to what we were operating in. But let me talk about Motherson a little so that you have a little better context as to how it evolved over a period of time. It is not natural that every company, every enterprise is literally operate in a multi-cloud hybrid sort of environment. No, that's not the case with all. But yes, slowly and gradually, each enterprise is moving towards that. Not again by choice, but by push. And there are a lot of these push factors. Let me talk about Motherson a bit. So Motherson, as we all know, is a conglomerate. So we as conglomerate are present in about 41 countries with 270 odd plants, primarily into automotive design engineering, but again are diversifying into healthcare, into IT, into defense, and many more areas to come. And interestingly, if at all someone follows Motherson, would realize that we are growing inorganically more than organic means, obviously because of M&As. And in such an environment, we all understand that when you acquire a company, you don't just acquire a company, you also acquire their people. You also acquire their processes. You also acquire their technology. So irrespective of how many times and how loud do I shout that we embrace standardization, we embrace harmonization, I can't. Because that's...
And risk as well. And risk as well.
Absolutely. Bang on. Bang on. So you're right. And if at all I start to talk about this conglomerate, conglomerate effectively means that I'm talking about 70 odd companies in one go. And each company has its own autonomy. So not everything is controlled centrally, is managed centrally. It is all distributed. It is all hybrid. And if at all I talk about the scale at which we operate, there are about 150 odd gateways. You could imagine the kind of infrastructure that we would have been managing in such a distributed environment. But and in all of this, 70% of our data is still on-prem. I'm not talking about what it used to be a decade ago or a decade and a half ago, but it is still 70% on-prem. But we always had this business need to remain flexible, to allow scalability because of obviously these M&As which keeps on happening in Motherson. So and that is exactly where we started our so-called software-defined journey by means of obviously virtualization, which each enterprise actually embarked upon almost a decade ago. Now, in the beginning, we had no cloud policy. We always had that if at all it is a data, it has to be manufacturing. It is too imperative because manufacturing operates in suburbs and it is near to the OEMs. If at all they are operating in suburbs, we have to have our facility also in those suburbs and very nearby. And if you really look at in those suburbs, the connectivity is very, very poor, irrespective of what geography you talk about. So there is certainly a dependency of having those data centers locally, irrespective whether they are minuscule, they are only having few servers and few network devices and so on and so forth. But then OEMs started to open up. We started to hear connecting cars and cloud and whatnot. OEMs opened up, so they become liberal and they opened up to allow us to also embrace the cloud. And that is exactly when our journey of cloud started off. But then since we were into a spree of M&A, every M&A that we now acquire is on a different cloud. So irrespective whether I am on Azure or I am on any other cloud service provider, the new company is on different. So my journey of multi-cloud started off. So in such an environment, you could imagine all those complexities that you also touched upon. I guess the challenges in general, which has been asked, are too obvious. And I'm sure that though there are very, very specific, depending on the kind of industry that an enterprise belongs to, the kind of business process that they belong to. But important is that how do we decide the placement of our workloads? In today's environment, especially when we are talking about work from anywhere, How do I decide that which data center would be near to my user if at all they are also mobile, they are also traveling? So in a sense that what would be my criteria to choose right cloud for the job also, not just where to place and the location. Then skill set management. I guess that in the diversification we can't manage skills also. We obviously need to see that how do we manage skills unless we standardize. Though non-standardization is something that we have been embracing, but in multi-cloud environment, skill set is again a big problem. Network connectivity, LAN WAN issues, in combination of LAN WAN, then now VPN and VPN less has started to come in. Direct connection has started to come in with IoT sensors, 5G, 4G in different geographies. They also started to peep in. So I guess in this perimeter-less environment, in such a complexity that we operate, this challenges are many, and I could talk about that for very long.
So Mohit, in fact, I had this question. As you mentioned, very, very interesting point. 70% of the data is on premise. You're embracing cloud, and there is multiple cloud you have to embrace because of the multiple M&As that you're having. And you mentioned some of the challenges like placement of workload, how to know which cloud to use for which users. So how did you overcome these challenges? What are you doing to overcome these challenges now?
This would be very challenging to actually answer, but let me attempt. I guess I talked about challenges which are too obvious. Some are workload placement that I touched on. What would be my criteria to choose which cloud to pick? In which geography of that cloud do I host my workload? I talked about skill set management, especially in the multi-cloud environment. I talked about network complexity, especially when we have LAN WAN and the combination of LAN WAN with VPN and internet and direct connections and 5G and 4G. The perimeter defenses are another set of concerns. How do I check who's knocking my door? Because in a perimeter-less environment, I need to know who's knocking my door. And unless I trust them, I would not be able to take a decision whether to allow or not to allow, and few more. And obviously, we are addressing this by adopting few products, few solutions, and journeys on. See, the fundamental expectation is provisioning and underutilization of cloud resources can certainly lead to overspending very quickly. And so you need to be very, very careful. And it's equally important to analyze our cloud resource utilization, its performance, to find what is running efficiently. And if at all it is not, then we should be able to take decision to upgrade, to downgrade the infrastructure. As maybe obviously would be very much required to do this cost optimization, not just embracing the agility and scalability that we generally do. But when it comes to security, we should be able to take decision to terminate any of the connection that is there if at all some wrong person, wrong user is knocking our door. We must, and that is where I guess that we started to explore multiple solutions and range of solutions initially, but then landed up in a platform approach which provides us a little seamless ability to interact with all workloads across our multi-cloud environments. So, and I guess that is where we would want to know that how to scale up, how to scale down seamlessly. Move application from say one platform to another or one environment to another altogether. And if at all there are predictive capabilities, how do we have an orchestration to change, to have this change management automatically? And I guess that that is where we are being very, very careful. One small advice that I always give to everyone, that don't rush in the race of adopting cloud. Whoever has been into this race of adopting cloud, we want to be very, very vigilant whether it is a business need, because cost reduction, a lot of people claim that it's a cost reduction, but that's not. It's I always say that it's a big shark with a sharp teeth. Unless you have taken your right evaluation, unless you have done right evaluation and taken the right decision, it would going to bite you very hard.
Sure. Yep. And in fact, this is a perfect segue to my next question, where I want to talk about the challenge that you spoke about, multiple environment. So when we talk about endpoints, we are generally thinking about, say, laptops, your mobiles, etc. But then there are smart factory devices as well. Your OT has multiple devices. So how do you take care of these devices which are in multiple environment? Abbas?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. So there is a new buzzword these days. We call it XDR, right? Extended Detection and Remediation Platform. And before that, we had a EDR, Endpoint Detection Remediation Platform. And before that, we had a antivirus and anti-malware, right? So we have gradually moved from antivirus, anti-malware to anomalous detection to EDR and now XDR. And XDR is nothing but now covering multiple kinds of multiple kind of OS endpoints and a hybrid, right? So to give an example from because Microsoft it is, so the vendors like Microsoft, they are now taking an approach in which they don't want to only secure the services and the product which is developed and provided by one vendor, which is Microsoft. We want to support our customer irrespective of what digital fabric they are using. Because as Mohit said, right, Android, iOS, Linux, Windows, proprietary firmware like for IT and OT part, multiple cloud, Google, AWS, or Azure, right? So the service which we have, they should be able to cater using a platform approach covering all the spectrum. That's why we call it end-to-end security from a multiple point solution, the multiple hybrid environment, as well as multiple operating system environment as well, including your IT OT part as well. It should be able to cover that.
Sure. And Mohit, Motherson Group is a conglomerate, as you mentioned. So how do you handle or put in place zero trust framework for the entire conglomerate and not only one enterprise? And because, you know, as you had I remember you had mentioned the maturity level, the requirements of every enterprise is different. It will vary. So how do you go about implementing the framework in your organization?
Well, this is again a very complex topic in Motherson, and for that matter, yes, you're right. It's very complex for any conglomerate, for that matter. And I guess that there are few fundamentals that we have always picked. See, zero trust by definition, many says that there is nothing like zero trust. I mean, you have to trust something, whether you trust a user or you trust a device or you trust something. But fundamentally, if you really look at zero trust security model, generally assumes that breach is inevitable. It would going to happen, or it has already has occurred into your environment. Some APTs is residing in your environment. So what it does is that it constantly limits your access to only what is needed. Now, any of the solutions that we pick certainly embrace quite a number of operational capabilities. Let me touch few of those which are very important, and then probably I'll touch what is it that we are doing and then what is our journey. I guess that the very fundamental is never trust, always verify, which is what is the model of zero trust.
Yeah, principle. Yeah.
So treat every user, every device, every application, every workload, or for that matter, every data flow. Make sure that you untrust that first, and then make sure that you verify and then start to trust. So that is where, and then do this reconciliation every now and then. Make sure that we authenticate and explicitly authorize each of this that I talked about: user, device, application, workload, or data, to least privileges. That is again one of the fundamental. I already talked about. Assume that breach has already taken place. It's already there into your environment. So you obviously need to again re-verify and verify very, very explicitly. So with these fundamentals, if we really look at manufacturing, always had been embracing these principles. And how I started off talking that we never had this so-called cloud policy. I mean, cloud used to come last. And as we are embracing these newer emerging technologies, irrespective whether it is EDR, XDR, cloud, and multiple solutions, we are opening doors. In manufacturing, we always used to say that no, if at all it is OT environment, since you're all talking about OT, it is, if at all it is OT environment, I don't want to interact with anyone else because these are my production machines and these machines which are very nearby, I don't want IT to even touch those machines.
Zero
And
trust.
even yes, zero trust. I don't trust even IT for that matter. And I don't trust even my own self as business person. I would only trust my OEM who has provided me that machine or that so-called OT device. And that is how it has been running for many, many years in manufacturing. Even today, I claim that 70% of my data is on-prem. This is the exact reason why it is on-prem. And I guess that we are happy. That is the only reason we are able to embrace security in such a complex environment that we are operating. So fundamentally, what have we done? So let me touch upon that aspect also. If at all it comes to OT and IT, the very fundamental is network segmentation. So network segmentation has been there for ages, for decades and decades. We had been using that. Now, to what extent do you do this network segmentation is entirely up to us. We used to embrace micro segmentation. Even in production, we used to have those work groups which used to be there and used to operate in silo. That is how we had so-called micro segmentation, not a managed micro segmentation, but a work group which was operating in silo, in which even IT wasn't allowed. And business people also didn't have any other permission other than those tapping in of some of the keystrokes that they are expected to make sure that that robotic machine or that for that SCADA or PLC machine is up and running. Then it is equally important to understand that in this zero trust, since there was no trust, it was all read only. It is still read only. And wherever we have even thin clients, and now the sophistication is increasing at thin clients, we started to have signature-less next-gen these malware protections. Like for instance, we talk about any EDR or XDR solutions, everyone is not everyone, but all good ones are giving you solutions to take care of your thin clients as well, because your malware like WannaCry, which was a Huawei at its time, used to even carry out in cache, and that is how it used to propagate from one environment to another. So read only, and wherever malware protection is possible, you deploy that and make sure that it is signatureless, because otherwise you don't have enough memories and enough spaces to operate. And then restricted access. So segregation of duties, I already talked about that not even IT has access to OT machines. So that is where again zero trust principles. But gradually, as we see that the convergence of IT and OT has started to come in, I guess that it became imperative for us to have something somewhere. And that is exactly where what we started to do is wherever OT requires any access. First is that we have very, very strong micro segmentation at a network layer. And all these convergence points that we have are being monitored using our SOC. And any anomaly, because what you fairly know how and for what purpose your OT machines are interacting with your IT and what users are allowed. So I guess that is how we started to embrace. We are still on our journey of full-blown so-called zero trust, but we'll adopt as our business would going to demand. But that would require more of mindset and cultural change.
Sure. And Abbas, like Mohit mentioned, the OT environment is very, very different. So how is zero trust framework relevant here in an OT environment? Is the framework, according to you, too early for OT?
No, absolutely. As Mohit already explained it in bit length, but I really concur with his definition of zero trust, especially in OT environment. And I would say Motherson, looking at hearing the story from Mohit, is very mature when he said that he already has a micro segmentation. In my experience in the region, I have seen most of the company who are operating in a IT, OT, and a SCADA environment, they have a flat network, having worked in many this kind of industry. That makes a number one problem for security folks to protect, because if something goes wrong in any of the end user endpoint device, it could propagate directly to the OT environment as well. So one of the core principles which Mohit talks about, right? The micro segmentation. That's one of the core area in today's modern zero trust approach or model, whatever you call it, right? You have to segment your environment according to the sensitivity and the criticality. That's the one way you can isolate the breach if something is going on in your environment with the assume breach mindset. So 3 principles: verify explicitly, assume breach, and a least privilege. But so micro segmentation concept of a zero trust is one of the critical area in OT environment. Second one, if you say, is it early or not too early? There is no question about that if it is early or not. If you can adapt it, because there is a change required if your network is flat. And today, from the zero trust point of view, if you have to start micro segmentation, it requires a lot of time and effort and energy in terms of technology investment and all. It's a big work, unless they have a CISO like Mohit who said, yeah, this has been there for a while and I'm managing it. It's much easier for him to roll out his approach of a zero trust in a much faster pace than compared to anyone else. Second part, Mohit touched upon the anomalies detection or the virus or anti-malware or behavior detection on your OT environment, right? For that, of course, you have to have something which is agentless or a signatureless, and have to have something which is a behavior based on the network traffic. So network tap, right? You tap the signal, and as again Mohit rightly explained, you exactly know how your OT or SCADA environments are sending the signal. For example, zeros and one. But if there is anything change, that means something has gone into the network which is going to create a havoc. So based on that anomalies and based on threat intel which you are collecting in your SOC or any other threat feed provider, from this behavior analytics point of view, from the network traffic, you're able to block those attacks into your OT environment, which is one of the key elements in your zero trust approach, where you are conditionally approving, or we call it conditional access, based on behavior, based on anomalies, and based on threat. You provide if then else access to different environment, could be OT, could be data, could be IT, and whatnot. So yeah, it is like that.
Sure, it's such a fascinating topic. I mean, we could go on and on for a couple of hours, I think more. But thank you so much, Abbas and Mohit, for sharing your views here on end-to-end security and how zero trust can play a role here. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. This is Suparna Goswami from ISMG. Thank you so much for watching.